Hello everybody, my name is Jack Kane and welcome to my video on color reading. Color reading is a sourcing technique that I put together a little while back that helps teach students to comb primary source documents, or really any document really, for pertinent information and to help turn those documents into quick reference guides that they can use later on when they're going back and they need to find all that pertinent information quickly. Sourcing is a historical heuristic for all of those of you who are not familiar with social studies terminology, and it helps to determine some key facts about the document that they're reading, such as where it comes from, who wrote it, and the information that it gives. So, the key questions that we're going to be asking of the document today are: who wrote this document? When and where was it written? What information does the author give? What is the author's perspective? And is this a reliable source? Why or why not? So, the context for this document is that it is part of a lesson that I put together teaching historical argument writing using the Battle of Thermopylae from ancient Greece and ancient Greek history to teach students how to use documents to build an argument based on historical evidence. For those of you who aren't familiar with the specific terminology, the Battle of Thermopylae is the battle that is sensationalized in the movie 300 from back in 2007. So, what we have here is one of the documents that I would have given to students, and I have included a copy of the document in the original forum post in the description if you want to take one of those out and use it to follow along, or if you want to engage in the activity yourself as we go through. So mechanically, what I'm using right now is Microsoft Word, and I'm using right now the full screen reading view mode. That way you can all read everything that's written on screen, and everything is in a nice large typeface. That way it is easy to be seen. So what we are going to do now is we are going to actually go through these questions individually and use the different colors to highlight the pertinent information that each question is asking. So the first question, who wrote this document, we're going to be using red. The second question, when and where was it written, we'll be using green. The third question, what information does the author give, we'll be using yellow. The fourth one, what is the author's perspective, we'll be using blue. And finally, is this a reliable source, why or why not, we will be using purple. Now, I use color reading because I feel as though it makes the document much more palatable for students who aren't particularly keen on reading and aren't particularly keen on rereading. And also, you can use a different version of this. If you have a colorblind student, you can go through and use a system of underlining or boxing or shapes if you want to make it so that a colorblind student would be able to benefit from this in the exact same way. So, let's get to the actual activity. This is document B. This is the second document out of the lesson. I picked this one because it is a bit shorter and is able to fit fully on the screen. That way we won't have to go back from page to page, and that way it'll make it easier for everybody watching at home. So, document B. Source. From Ctesias of Cnidus' book Persica, written in 398 BCE, though he was a Greek historian, Ctesias lived in Persia and was a court historian to Persian kings. Then Xerxes, having collected a Persian army of 800,000 men and 1,000 ships, without counting the chariots, set out against Greece. His general Artapanus, with 10,000 men, fought an engagement with Leonidas, the Spartan general, at Thermopylae. The Persian host was cut to pieces, while only 2 or 3 of the Spartans were slain. The king then ordered an attack with 20,000, but these were defeated, and although flogged to the battle, were routed again. The next day he ordered an attack with 50,000, but without success, and accordingly ceased operations. Several generals who were present with their forces were summoned by Xerxes together with his other advisors, who told him that the Spartans could never be defeated unless they were surrounded. A Persian army of 40,000 men was conducted by the 2 leaders of the Trachinians over an almost inaccessible mountain path to the rear of the Spartans, who were surrounded and died bravely to a man. So, let's get to the actual mechanical process of color reading. So up here you can see that the highlighting tool is still accessible in full screen view. I'm going to make sure that I have the appropriate color selected for our first question, which is red, and now we can begin. So who wrote this document? Up here in the source description we can see that this document was written by Ctesias of Cnidus, who we can see later on was a court historian. So, now we can move on to the second question. When and where was it written? So I will go up here. I will switch my highlighting color to a light green. I'm using lighter colors right now, so that way they will all show up and you can still read the text behind them. Ordinarily, if you were going to give this to a class, you could have them use highlighters, or you could have them use markers or colored pencils. But the beauty of using this highlighting activity is that it can also be done electronically if you would like. So, when and where was it written? I'm going to highlight this in green. We see up here in the description again that this was written in 398 BCE and that Ctesias lived in Persia. So we have 398 BCE and Persia. So the third question is the bulk of the assignment, which is highlighting the actual information in yellow. So I've switched my highlighter to yellow, and now we can comb through this again and we can look for the actual information. So the first information that we can see is presented is a Persian army of 800,000 men and 1,000 ships without counting the chariots. This is the first piece of information, and now we can continue on highlighting all of the rest of the actual pertinent information. So we can highlight from his general Artapanus all the way down to the first instance that we see of the word defeated, detailing how many men Artapanus had, how many men were ordered with the first attack. And now we can continue. The next day he ordered an attack with 50,000 but without success, and accordingly ceased operations. Now we can continue going to the last chunk of actual information, that the Spartans could never be defeated unless they were surrounded, and a Persian army of 40,000 men was conducted over the mountain pass. So, this is the actual information. Now, this is going to be the largest chunk of the actual highlighting that is done by you or by your students, but this is just the actual bulk of the information, and this is obviously going to swell or contract depending on how large and how comprehensive the document that you give your students will be. So, we'll move on to the fourth question. What is the author's perspective? I will switch to my light blue highlighting tool. And now if we go back up here in the description, we can see that Ctesias of Cnidus was a court historian to Persian kings. So this is going to obviously be the perspective that Ctesias had on the actual battle and the events that transpired. So this is what's going to wind up coloring his perspective. But now we move on to the last question. Is this a reliable source? Why or why not? Which we will be highlighting in purple. I'm choosing a lighter purple shade. Obviously this is probably more akin to pink, but we will be using this to try to go through and try to pick out the words that make this a reliable source or an unreliable source. And for this document, what I would suggest is that you look through and try to look for the tone of voice that Ctesias is using. So we're going to first wind up highlighting this first phrase, having collected. This sort of implies that there is a factual tone to Ctesias' account, which is much different than most other accounts that one would find of Greek history, especially those of Herodotus, where it's very mythical and it sort of deifies the Greek point of view in all of the battles. So we will go through and we will start highlighting other words and other phrases that sort of give this perspective. So we'll go here to his general Artapanus with 10,000 men. With implies that Ctesias is all but certain that there was a definite amount of people with General Artapanus. And we can go through and then we can look for this similar type of language. The king then ordered an attack with 20,000. Not with roughly 20,000, not with a fabled number or some ludicrously large force. With 20,000. We can go further down. Another attack with 50,000. And then we go down here, several generals who were present with their forces. They were definitely there, they were not said to have been there, and they are not implied that they are there. They were there, according to the tone that Ctesias of Cnidus has set. A Persian army of 40,000 men was conducted by the two leaders of the Trachinians, and then we can see the most important piece of information when talking about if this is a reliable source. The very end of the document, the Spartans who were surrounded and died bravely to a man. This sort of implies that even though Ctesias of Cnidus is giving a Persian perspective, he is still acknowledging Spartan bravery, and he is acknowledging that they died bravely to a man. Not that they died, not that they were routed, not that they were defeated in some sort of ludicrous or comical way, but that they were surrounded and died bravely. It implies a very calm, a very factual tone, which is something that is much more difficult to find in ancient Greek historians than most people are able to find. So, that is it for my description of color reading. If anyone has any questions, feel free to give me an email or send me a message or leave a post on the forum. I'd like to thank everybody for their time and their attention in watching this video, and I will see everybody very soon.